Hello, welcome. My name is Michael Dorinda, and I'm joined today by
Greg Skirman.
today and always, and this is episode 1 of the Ripples podcast. Now, those of you hearing my voice not for the first time will be wondering, Michael, why are you doing a fourth, a fifth podcast? This kind of comes off the back of the welcome that I did to Laracon Australia in 2023, and kind of the theme of that conference was ripples and how putting yourself out there, thanks to Uncle Aaron Francis, can lead to unexpected but good things happening to you in the future. And whether those things are immediate or 6 months or 3 years down the track, you never know. The whole intent is to put yourself out there. And Greg is joining me because Greg has been living the Ripples dream since the conference, putting himself out there, overcoming his inhibitions and perhaps his fears of not necessarily public speaking, but putting himself onto that Laracon stage has led to good, unexpected things happening. And I'll let Greg talk about that. But that's kind of what this podcast is going to be a bit more like. It's, it's not a Laravel news. It's not a necessarily talking about the things that I'm doing at work or the things that I'm doing in my, outside of work or anything like that. There are already places for that. This is going to be more about people's journeys, and it'll evolve over time. Maybe we'll bring guests on. Maybe it'll just be Greg and I talking about these things in perpetuity. And but we thought we would just get the ball rolling. We've been talking about starting this podcast for about 3 weeks now, and so I've said if we want to get out in January, we have to do it now. So there'll be no edits. There'll be no tidying it up. We're just going to hit record. We're going to do our 30 minutes, and then we're going to ship it to the world for everyone to hear. So, Greg, do you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
I'm the director of technology at a Brisbane-based company called iSeek Plant. So we're Australia's largest online construction marketplace. I think it has been referred to as the Tinder of the construction industry. So primarily we connect people who need heavy plant equipment and construction services with the people who have those things and supply those things, which is, as it turns out, a really wicked problem that has absorbed me for going on 7 years now. And during that time, I've had an opportunity to play with some interesting things. And not that I necessarily thought they were interesting things when I started doing them. I just started, like all of us, I guess, just started doing things. And in the last few years, probably last 5 years, I've become really, really obsessed with workflow and team performance and how to get the most out of a small group of people. Because like a lot of startups, particularly in Brisbane, budgets aren't unlimited. And particularly after like the tech wreck, there's not like millions and millions of dollars available. So trying to figure out ways that I can get the very best out of the people that I can afford to have without burning them out and without completely destroying their personal lives, which I guess would be the other way to do it. That was the sort of basis of a pitch I put together for a Laracon talk, which I wasn't expecting to get accepted, and then it got accepted. So here we are, and I figured it'd be a good idea to chat about some of this stuff and potentially get some of these ideas into the wider community. Tell people like it's okay to talk about the work you're doing.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's an interesting point that you raised, that I think you put maybe 2 or 3 submissions forward to speak at Laracon AU. And as you say, you were surprised that the one that I selected was probably not the one that you were expecting, and probably the one that was less cooked up in your head when it was submitted. But I think the ripples that have come from that talk have shown you that is really something that resonates with the community and with a lot of people, not only tech leads and engineering managers, but for developers in those teams, how you can build software faster, how you can ship smaller things, how you can focus on what's really important to the business, and And on the back of that, you've certainly been putting yourself out there a lot more and putting those ideas and thoughts out into the world. And it's led to some interesting things for you as well, commercially, in terms of mentoring and training.
Yeah. I mean, again, that was completely not planned. I had a bunch of people reach out to me I think initially on the night of the After Dark at Laracon, which, by the way, that as a first-time speaker, that's the most wonderful experience. So if you get anything out of anyone's talks when you go to these things, you don't. I mean, you get a round of applause when you leave the stage, but that's not really feedback. I think in a lot of times you sort of wonder whether or not that's just people being polite.
Yeah.
But having people come up to you and say, that really resonated, I'd like to dig into that a little bit more, was sort of the first impression that I got that people might actually be interested in this stuff. I've then had people reach out to me after the fact to want to go into some things in greater detail, and I thought for a little while that perhaps I should offer it as a service. There seemed to be enough interest out there that people might be willing to pay to have me speak to them on a sort of monthly basis and help them through some of their problems. That wasn't something that I expected to be doing. I didn't go into this whole thing with that in mind. But yeah, it's true what Aaron says. Just you do stuff and stuff happens.
That's right. That's exactly right. And that's kind of where we've landed here, is that, you were probably one of the earliest people to see bits and pieces of my talk. I think you and I connected kind of quite well before the conference and the lead up to the conference. And certainly we've been talking a lot since the conference about different ideas that we've got and just the things that we've seen. The ripples concept, the ripple effect is, it is a thing, but it took me a while, and it wasn't until I was speaking to my friend Alex from Maxo, one of our sponsors, that kind of clicked into place, that he sort of unrelatedly mentioned something about me introducing him to Tailwind 2-3 years ago now, and how he'd only just come around to that idea. But then he said, maybe you had created a ripple, and that kind of, I had all the pieces of my welcome address in place. It was not until he used that exact wording that it kind of made sense. And as I said, that became the theme of the conference. And we've seen a lot of that from, not only speakers like yourself. I know Marty Friedel has been doing his bits and pieces out in the world since the conference, and also attendees. I know Mitchell Davis has really taken that to heart, and he's started his own podcast, which you were on the first episode, I think, with James Brooks.
Yeah.
So we'll link that up in the show notes. But it's these little things, and I'm interested to stay connected with the community that, especially the people that were at Laracon, to kind of see how they've taken that out into the world, and whether or not that's something that, actually lives from Laracon to Laracon. So when we do Laracon AU 2024, that, we can revisit it a little bit and see, how much of an impact that did have over, it's been 3 months now since Laracon AU 2023. So over the next 9 months, how much of that is carried forward? Not even, or not specifically yourself, because we'll talk about this every other week, once a month, however often we decide to run this podcast, and to see how you're progressing with, the mentoring and the coaching, and see if that grows or if something that kind of drops off. But also maybe we reach out to people that attended Laracon and see if that had an impact on them, and how, especially different speakers, we pluck all kinds of different speakers from different parts of not only the Laravel community, but also just kind of around the fringes. I know that Nina gave a really powerful talk about, overcoming your circumstances and going out and doing something like that. It may not seem like a lot to you and me specifically, but to the people that, that look like Nina, the people that have been in those situations, does seeing someone on stage like that impact you very differently to how it impacts you and me? and to see how
Yeah, for
that
sure.
impacts people. So I'm really interested to see if this was like a flash in the pan that lives only at Laracon, or if people really took that to heart and kind of follow that through to see where that
Mm.
lands in another 9 months' time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a powerful concept. I mean, I've been following Aaron for a number of years. He and I connected over some technical stuff around server-side rendering with Laravel Vapor, and have sort of time zones notwithstanding, have stayed in contact relatively consistently from them. So obviously, I was aware of his message almost since he started talking about it. But I think actually giving it a name like Ripples has kind of, for me, that kind of, I think the analogy you made of like just throwing a pebble into the pond and then watching the ripples emanate kind of made me think that you can do it a lot more intentionally. Like, it's not just a case of working in public. You can actively decide to try and make a particular kind of ripple. Like for me, I mean, I'm a technical manager of a Laravel team, so I'm sort of in the Laravel community, but my particular areas of expertise are probably on the fringes of what Laravel is, and I don't see it getting talked about a lot in the Laravel community, and I'd love that it was talked more. So part of what I'm trying to do is seed some of these ideas that come out of big tech and come out of working in startups into the Laravel community more. So yeah, I think giving it a name like that's allowed it to be a little bit more intentional, and I think that's certainly part of it. The other thing about the community is that Australia is a really, really large. For those who don't live in Australia who might be listening, there we go, jinxing it to say that there's going to be anyone who's interested in hearing. Australia is a really, really large country with a relatively small population, so the Laravel community is a really I don't want to say fractured, but it is sort of burdened by a lot of distance between the cities. And having some central idea that we all gravitate to, like this ripples concept, I think is a really powerful way of building community as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you point out the size and to people living in Europe thinking I'll just drive over to Sydney. It's not quite that. I just did it over Christmas, and it's like an 18-hour drive. It's not just like, it's not driving England to France and to Switzerland and to Italy. It is like to cross state lines is hours and hours of driving. So,
well, you live in Queensland like me, just to go to the next city is an hour and a half. Like, it's
yeah. So
not quite. But
like, we know that the community is there because they turned up to Laracon, and I hope that they turn up to Laracon again, and they all connect. But hearing the stories, especially for people that are living more remotely, more regionally, those connections don't exist between the conference, and something that we kind of want to do, and I'm not sure exactly how, because even the capital city based meetups are kind of, we're all talking about Laravel, but they're all doing their own thing. There's not really any cross communication or synergy of ideas or of operations or anything like that. Each one is doing their own thing, so it's a little bit siloed towards a common goal, and that it culminates in Laracon AU. We're fortunate to be in a position to now have that, and hopefully, knock on wood, have that annually now, is really good. But I think trying to keep everyone connected more consistently and to stay in touch. Like, one of the people that has helped me out in previous Laracon, and certainly did in 2023, Rocco, he turns out lives about 15 minutes away from my sister, who lives on the other side of the country in somewhere you wouldn't expect to be. And so I was there, and we caught up and we had dinner when I was there. And when I was doing venue tours around the country for Laracon this year, I caught up with, a whole bunch of, yourself and Jess and a few of the other people that are based in Brisbane. So, it's something that's kind of lost because we're so far apart. And I know the same is true for Laracon EU and Laracon US, where you're getting together and seeing your friends. And it's like catching up with an old friend. You just pick up where you left off. But it'd be nice if that would be a little bit more consistent, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of people travel for work too, and sometimes you can be in a strange city for a week, and um, I've often found myself wondering whether or not there's an event or a meetup I could go to, and just knowing when they're on, it's kind of I run the Brisbane Laravel meetup with help from Jess Archer and some others, but I don't think you would know when the next one is, or where do we even find where the
and
next
usually
one
I find out
might actually
a
be
few
held.
hours before. I mean, sometimes there's messages about it in the PHP Australia Slack. This is coming up next month, or today's the event, so the next one is like next month. Here is the date. But between when you say it's happening next month and that date, like I've forgotten about it until a few hours before, where a reminder goes out. Hey, this thing is tonight. So it's
Yeah.
it's connected, but it's fractured in some ways, and not like bad fractured. It's just that there's never really been any concerted effort to try and bring it all together, just so that as you say, if people are traveling, if you go from Brisbane to Adelaide and you can go, oh, there's a meetup tonight, I'll go and hang out with some Laravel people while I'm here because I've got nothing else to do other than sit in my hotel room and stare at the walls. So.
Yeah, I mean, I know Australia's probably roughly the same size as the US by area, but we've got like a tenth of the population, and that's really the crucial part. I interestingly ran the Brisbane Laravel meetup, I think a week and a half after Laracon AU, and there was a real appetite for meetups. Like obviously we were channeling some mad Laracon energy at the time, but we had, I think, the biggest turnout we've had. We had a bunch of people who had never shown up before, which was really great, which kind of spurred me on to thinking that there's definitely something there, and it'd be great to sort of trap the lightning in a bottle and keep that sort of energy rolling throughout the entire year. It's also a great way of pipelining speakers because, like, I can tell you, I've spoken at meetups before. I can tell you that the fear is real when you're trying to stand up in front of 300 people. So it's good to get some practice under your belt with a smaller, perhaps friendlier. Not that the audience at Laracon was unfriendly,
expectation
but
is different at a meetup.
Well, yeah. I mean, at Laracon, people are paying good money to hear you speak. You kind of puts the weight of the world on your shoulders. That you've got to deliver some value.
Pipeline is certainly the way to look at it as well. If you think that you can speak but you're not really sure, you've got that bee in your bonnet about being scared speaking in front of the audience, then the meetups are a great way to do it. And the meetups are also a great way for the organisers like yourself and those in Sydney and Melbourne and in Adelaide to kind of pick out those speakers and go, hey, I think you've got something here. I think you should seriously consider whether or not you want to present that on a bigger stage. And like it's a good launch pad, as we've talked about already with yourself. You've given a talk and you've ended up in a position to offer coaching as a service. Tim and Jess, they spoke at Laracon 2019 and they both work for Laravel now. Simon Vrashiotis, he's off doing his own thing. Not that he wasn't already on that trajectory, I think, beforehand, but he's now in a position where he's doing what he loves doing with Kent C. Dodds, and he's been putting himself out there for years and he's been doing the work. But I think putting yourself on a big public stage, especially something as big as a Laravel, whether it's US or Australia or Europe or India, even if it's a Laravel Live in the UK or Denmark, like putting yourself on that stage is going to unlock unexpected good things.
Yeah. I think it's also important too that I was actually having an unrelated conversation with a friend recently about similar sorts of things. And the sort of imposter syndrome is real, and sometimes that can get reinforced if the thing that you put yourself out there doesn't land quite the way that you expected it to. I think one of the things that Aaron pointed out in his talk at US last year was that your job isn't to make people engage with your content or engage with the message that you're saying. Your job is just to get your message out there. And really it's about consistency, right? It's not just about going and speaking at a meetup or submitting a talk for Laracon. It's about doing some of the stuff that Mitchell's doing. He's like, Mitchell missed out on speaking at Laracon by, as I understand it, like
one spot,
an inch.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he could have taken that as I'm not good enough. I'm not going to do this. Or he can go and create a podcast and invite the speakers and other people from the community to talk about that as a way of latching onto that. So really, it's just a case of you just got to keep doing stuff. Like no one knows what's going to work.
Yeah.
No one has a clue what's going to work, and you've just got to keep throwing it out there. And you'll take some lumps. God knows I have. But if you're not gonna if you don't put yourself out there, you'll never know.
Yep. Yeah, you've got to try the things and see what works and hone in on the things that work. And like not everything's going to work. The old saying, if you fall over 7 times, well, you've got to get up 8 times, kind of thing. To just keep trying the things, find 100%. The thing that works, and then make that thing stick and pursue that until that doesn't work anymore, and then maybe do something else. But yeah, you've got to start, I think, is the thing. And you'll never know, sure. And if you don't start, there's the what ifs,
and it'll be the silliest thing. It'll be the silliest thing. It won't be the thing you expect it was. Adam
Wadlin's a good example of that. He's now the tailwind kingpin of the world, but that all started not because he was building. No, he didn't set out to build a CSS framework. What he was doing was setting out to build a SaaS platform to make selling his content that he had created, courses and things like that, books. He set out to make something easy to sell the tools. And everyone that was watching his streams and saying, what's that CSS framework you're using? And he's like, it's just this dumb thing that I copy and paste between all of my projects that I throw away. And, now, like that has set him up. And like, don't get me wrong, not everyone is going to create, this massive company around an open source CSS framework. It's just not realistic, but it's putting the things out there and really listening to the people that are paying attention, because they will tell you more often than not the direction that you should be heading in. Yeah, exactly.
And it's the same with product development. Like the parallels between what we actually do professionally and doing that sort of working publicly are pretty crazy, right? I always talk about working in small disposable increments of work, and that's effectively the same thing, right? Just try a bunch of stuff and see what works. Adam is like the poster child for that concept, because I don't know Adam, but I get the impression from that story that he had no clue that was the golden ticket at all.
Yep. I mean, and he was in the fortunate position of having put out the refactoring to collections book. So he had a bit of a cushion there for himself where he could take some time and then go and build that thing. But, it was not until he put himself out there with that. And, he was speaking at conferences before that, and he was publishing content, and he was in the public eye. He had, the Full Stack Radio podcast. Like, he was doing all of these things in public, building an audience, which culminated in him being in a position that he is basically set for life. And again, for as long as he wants to do that, what does he want to do is the thing that came out of when he was talking to Ian and Aaron on their podcast before Christmas. So I think that's what we kind of want to hone in on this show. Really, is just finding the people and the things that they're doing, hearing the the unexpected stories and the unexpected outcomes. And Adam is the financial poster child, but Aaron Francis really is the spiritual parental figure of this movement. And like it has traction in the community. I think I was just very fortunate to kind of put a bow on it in the way that I did last year. And I had all the disparate pieces. And like I said to him, and I said to Matt Stauffer, who I also borrowed some ideas from, I said, I wouldn't ordinarily do this kind of welcome, but because it's been 4 years, I think it's important to really set the tone and set the focus for what the conference is all about and why people come to the conference and you know the things that kind of come out of the back of it. You know, it's about the speakers, yes, it's about the presentations, and hopefully this year it'll be much more evident that like it's about the community and the connections that you build. And whether that's Laracon AU or another conference that you attend, the community and the connections that you build and the energy that you have from that environment does not exist the moment that conference ends and you're back on the plane home. Like, you just can't recreate it. It's not the same jumping on a phone call or talking on Slack or in Discord or on Laracast forums. Like, those are just avenues for Q&A and like help, and I'm stuck on something. They're not the same as like I tweeted a photo of Marcel and Nuna. One, you know, after the conference finished, we were just hanging out in the hotel restaurant or the hotel bar, and it's just like something crazy is going to come from that conversation that's happening right there, and that's only going to happen because those two people are in the room at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, and this was the real cruelty of the whole pandemic, right? Is that so much of that stopped. I think it's been said heaps of times by lots of people that like 80% of communication is non-verbal. So even if you're on a Zoom call, it just doesn't hit the same, right? You can't pick up on that subtle cue that someone's really excited about something that, you know, you've just said something and you might have hit on an idea. So yeah, I mean, it was good to get back. It was good to actually get back and feel a community. And it's an absolutely awesome community. I think I've said it heaps of times. I've said it to you. I've said it to James. That like I didn't know James Brooks before I went there. He and I were getting on like a house on fire. Like it's really like meeting 300 of your best mates. You just don't know that you've got them.
Sure.
Yeah. Anyway, on the subject of Laracon, I know a few things. Is there anything that you want to share? In a little bit of a longer form.
In a little bit of longer form. I've got a few minutes here to spare. So obviously Laracon AU is coming back this year. We made that announcement at the end of the conference. Like we were already committed to doing it, and it was just a matter of figuring out when and where. And so at this stage, I know when and where it will be exactly. I'm working through the final details with the venue coordinator, just working on, you know, our requirements and some things around quoting and, you know, just boring conference organizations
business
stuff.
Things.
We're still working on a few budget line items to come back in terms of, you know, locking that down. I've got a rough indication of price. For anyone listening, it's I say it's with like a sigh because it's going to be more, but we're also going to pack a whole lot more into the conference this year. We're going to do definitely lunch, probably afternoon tea on both days. We're doing after dark will continue. We're doing Friday night immediately after the conference on the grounds of the venue. We'll have a further networking event, and this is something I think it was you that raised this to me, that anyone that speaks on the second day doesn't have the same opportunity to kind of talk with the audience that the first day speakers do it after dark. So I'm really hoping that this gives another avenue for attendees and speakers to kind of really dig into some of those ideas by having the networking event on the second night as well. And you know, we'll do it immediately after the conference. So, because I know that people want to get back home and things like that after the conference is finished, but we're hoping that presenting a formal opportunity for them to network will at least put them onto a slightly later flight, if not going home on the next day. So the conference will be it will be a Friday and a Saturday again in November. So you've got, I guess, a 1 in 4 chance of Thursday and Friday. Yep. So.
You said Friday, Saturday. I was going to break everybody out.
No, it's a Thursday and Friday. Sorry. Yeah, it will be on a Thursday and Friday in November. So you've got a 1 in 4 chance of pinning the tail on that donkey. It's not like a huge secret, but we're just, because Taylor announced the Laracon US dates and location last week, because Laracon AU is happening at the beginning of February, and because Laracon India is happening at the end of March, we're kind of holding on like any marketing or anything like that, but we hope to have something up by the end of February, which will kind of put you in the headspace for like, okay, I'm committed to this, whether or not you're going to start looking at flights and things like that. As I said, tickets will be more. They will be necessarily more than what they were last year, but you're getting double the networking, you're getting catered lunch. So these are all extra things that you don't have to worry about. Like, where am I going to eat Thursday and Friday after the conference? You don't have to worry about what you're doing for lunch. And we're working on a whole heap of other things that are just really going to reinforce the community and the networking opportunities, whether or not you take up all of them, you take up some of them. I know that, 2 days packed like that is a lot, especially for people who are like myself, typically quite introverted in those situations. You can pick and choose, but the options will be there. We're going to make it, as possible for you to get as much out of those aspects, because that was a big bit of feedback from last year, was that because...
Yeah, importantly, this is all driven from feedback, right?
Yeah, that was the two main bits of feedback. Number one was that the chairs were not comfortable, and I can assure you that the chairs this year will be comfortable. When I met with the venue tech that was there said that they have seen dads fall asleep at dance recitals there. So if you can fall asleep at in these chairs, I think you'll be okay. And then the second thing, obviously, was that, the opportunities to network. When groups got together and they came to the conference, they kind of hung out in the conference together. They went out to lunch together. They came back from lunch together, and they went back into the theater. And so we're gonna enable that a lot more this year. The foyer of the auditorium that we've hired out is actually hired out as a separate cocktail function spot. So there is plenty of room for us to be able to mingle and stay in a nice air conditioned space as well.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I can't wait for it to come around again. Hopefully, you'll accept my CFP this year, as long as I stop talking about mint slices and avocados, I guess.
Gee, you'd be lucky if I let you in the door.
All right, man. So. I think we're at time. We're a little over, but that's not too bad. That was cool. But yeah, I will look forward to coming back in a fortnight or a month or something, and hopefully have something to talk about. In the meantime, if anyone feels like they want any of my time, you can find me on Twitter. I refuse to call it the other thing, or LinkedIn. Happy to chat about what I might be able to help you with if you ever find anything that I say interesting.
Excellent. And we will have... There is your big plug.
Big plug.
And we'll have show notes. There won't really be any show notes. This is a very low-key podcast, but you can find the podcast at Riverside. No, you can find the podcast at ripples.fm. And details will be there. If you have any suggestions, if you want to come on, if you are one of those people that was in the audience and want to talk about how ripples may have impacted you, or you just want to talk on a podcast, find me or Greg on Twitter, and we will be happy to have a chat. But until next time, see you all.
Later.